Hi students. So for Unit 5 we've got the whole thing in one long video. So if you don't have the time to watch the whole thing, then you can always push pause on me and come back to me later. So this will be for all of your notes, this one video for all of your notes. So here we go. Today we're going to start a topic called evolution. So maybe you've heard of evolution before. Evolution, sometimes when people think of evolution, they think about monkeys and, oh, humans used to be monkeys. Maybe you've learned that, maybe not. So what we're going to talk about is evolution. And when we talk about evolution in this science class, we're really meaning a very gradual change in where the people or even dogs or animal looks different after a very, very long amount of time than their ancestors. So when we're talking about evolution, we're going to specifically talk about species. So species is a group of organisms. They can reproduce and have fertile offspring. So I always like to use an example of this, that, for example, we can't have a dog. This is going to be a dog. We can't have a dog, that's his tongue sticking out, and a cat. Dogs and cats, can they make kitty puppies? No, that would be super weird. They cannot make kitty puppies. So this equals no. They are a different species. That's how we know, because they cannot reproduce to have offspring. Of course, there's some examples, like a donkey and a horse or whatever, they make mules, but mules are not fertile, they're sterile. So that's an example. Now, you see the word fossil here. When you see fossil, maybe you think, oh, dinosaurs. And yes, you're right, we're going to be talking about dinosaurs and other things. So fossils are traces of an organism that has lived before. They could be a dinosaur footprint, would be a great example. There's several other examples, which we'll actually talk about in Unit 6. But for now, you just need to know fossils or traces. Now, there's this dude named Charles Darwin. He was a super famous scientist. He went to this place called the Galapagos Islands. We're actually going to do an activity in class where we're going to talk about this. But he went to this Galapagos Islands. He lived in England, which is like cold and rainy and stuff, and he went to the Galapagos Islands, and of course that's tropical, as you would expect. This was in the 1800s, and he had to actually take a ship to get there, and he was on the ship for 5 years. It took him 5 years to get there on a boat. That's crazy. So when he went there, he said, hey, things look different here than they do in England. Specifically, some of the animals do. Some birds. They look different. What's that about? And he's the one that coined the term natural selection and survival of the fittest, which we'll get into even more. So Darwin, he noticed something about birds. He also noticed something about turtles. So you see here we have 3 different types of turtles. We have the domed, we have the intermediate, and the saddleback. So look at the difference here. It's really, the difference is that you're looking at their shell. See the difference in their shell? So what would account for these differences? I wonder why they're all turtles. They're all about the same size. It seems like they should be about the same. But they had variations. Variation means variety, differences. So these differences were, for example, it was probably because they ate differently, because they had different diets. Perhaps this guy, the saddleback, maybe he ate from trees up high. So see how his neck is going to be able to stretch up to reach a tree? Whereas maybe this guy is going to eat grass and things down low. Maybe he could eat both. Maybe he had both available, so he could eat both. So that's why his shell isn't so tall. Now, this is really what Darwin is famous for, is Darwin's finches. So he noticed that bird shapes are different, and that their differences in the bird shape actually makes them more suited for their environment, that they're able to eat what they need to eat. So let's look at some of these bird shapes. So first we have this guy. So he eats nectar from a flower. So he's got this nice long thin beak, which is going to let him do that. Here we have this guy. So look at the difference in these two beaks. Wow. His beak has this like kind of, it looks very strong compared to this beak, right? Look, he has to use that to peel back bark. So he uses this as a little hook. That's why his beak looks different. Then here we got the nut crusher. He is going to eat seeds and nuts. He's going to crush them with his very, very strong beak. So you can see all these different beaks as because they are all best suited for their environments. So this vocabulary here, so we've got competition. You probably know what competition is. If you've ever played sports or something, you know you're going to attempt to get the same resource. When you play soccer on the soccer team, you're attempting to both win, right? You both want to get it into your goal. Animals will compete for resources all the time. Now, there's these two different words here. There's first word is interspecific. That means members of different species are going to compete. For example, if deer and squirrel are both in the same forest and they both eat the same nuts from a tree, they are competing. Their competition is interspecific for the nuts on the ground. Conversely, we have intraspecific. So intraspecific is members of the same species. So this would be, for example, squirrels competing for the same nuts at the park. Same species, intra. All right. Fossil evidence. So Darwin, he was a geologist. This word geo means earth. He was a geologist, so he knew that the earth was changing, and he found evidence that the earth had changed very, very, very slowly over a long time. So he found fossils of huge animals, aka dinosaurs, that don't exist anymore, but are similar to living species. He knew that that must mean that there was something that over a very, very long time there had been some changes, that the earth doesn't look the same now as it looked millions of years ago when those animals lived here. So Darwin found this seashell on top of a mountain. How's that possible? Why would a seashell be on top of a mountain? Think about it. So you guys are going to watch your song, and let's talk about, oh, this is kind of hard to see, isn't it? So let's talk about why species change. So there are a couple of types of change. There's one type called artificial selection, and there's another type called natural selection. I'm going to see if we can kind of talk more here about artificial selection. Don't make fun of this poodle. It's my favorite. So humans, this is important. It's on the test. Test alert. Humans are the selective force in natural selection. So nature is the selective force in natural selection. So I'm telling you about two different types of selection. Artificial selection is where humans choose the most desirable traits. Natural selection is where nature does. Well, it's not like Mother Nature deciding. It's like whatever's best suited for the environment, whatever's going to help it survive is going to choose the traits. Whatever's going to help it get more food and water. Whatever's going to help it to reproduce. Now, this is a party poodle here. Hello, little party poodle. So those are bred specifically by breeders to have the spots like that, and breeders choose that. They artificially select that. So we have here an example of antibiotic-resistant bacteria. So you know when you're sick, you get antibiotics. Antibiotics are going to kill bad bacteria in your body. So before natural selection, you can see right here, there's, some different colors, right? After selection, meaning survival of the fittest, the best suited, these guys, these red guys, they won. They beat the antibiotic. So now the final population is going to all be resistant to the antibiotic, and a new antibiotic is going to have to be made. That's why doctors are very hesitant to prescribe you. So this is very important on the test here, is 4 pieces of natural selection. I'm going to try to like move this slide a little bit so you can see it. Oh, I see it's kind of cut off. All right. So first is variation. Remember, variety, differences. When you see the word variation, I want you to think differences. Next is overproduction. That's exactly what it sounds like. If an organism has more babies than it can support, basically. And this is not humans, obviously. Well, humans, we have government assistance. But animals in the forest, they don't have anybody to, give their baby food. So if there's too many animal babies, that's called overproduction. Next is adaptation. So adaptations are changes, variations, little variations that give a organism an advantage over the other ones. For example, the fastest running wolves, they would have the advantage over the slow wolves because they'd be able to catch the deer to eat them. Descent with modification means that future generations look different than the ones before. So if we're looking again at population, now population is all the individual members of a species that live in that given area. So for this one, I always like to do the example of population is all of the dogs on Avalon Boulevard near my Watts Center that I work at. So we work on Watts, not really in Watts, it's kind of like Compton, but it's on El Segundo and Avalon. So on my way to work almost every day, I see some dogs. And they are the population of dogs. They live in this certain area down that stretch of Avalon I take to get to work. And they would be the example of a population. Another example, all the people in Los Angeles. Another example, all the students at Opportunities for Learning. Those are examples of population. So, fitness. Fitness is an organism's ability to survive. Now, this is very important, and I always say the same joke. Fitness, it is not who looks best in their bathing suit. It is who can survive. So fitness, we are not talking about who looks good. We're talking about who can survive. So evidence of evolution up next. Now, fossil evidence. We've got fossil evidence of evolution. So you can see these, we've got a starfish, we've got, a fish bones, and this we can see. Now, if the fossils are found in a higher rock layer, they're going to be more similar to species that are here now than ones found in deeper rock layers. So let me just show you guys that example here. Whoops. Always do that. I'm going to make that small. So if here's our tree. Hello, tree. Here we go. So underneath the earth, there's several layers. So if we find a little shell, a little snail shell here, and then we also find a snail shell here, the more recent snail shell, this one, the one that's closer to the surface, is going to be more recently than this one, which is farther underneath. That's what that means, that the higher rock layers are more similar to current species. Geographic evidence. Whenever you see geographic, you probably, should think of maps. So this has to do with place. So similar environments have similar species living in them, even if the ecosystems are half a world apart. So here I have a next page. So we can see I have placental mammals and marsupial mammals. So notice that they seem kind of similar, right? See, this guy is just a really ugly version of him. They look pretty similar. Same goes here. He's a cuter version, if you could say that, than this guy. These guys are separated geographically, however, they are very similar to each other. They live half a world apart. These guys are from Australia. These guys, this guy's from Asia and this guy's from North America. So that's a half a world apart. Now, this is evidence of evolution. Now, you guys can see that at the bottom here, so notice down here, see all these ones at the bottom? These are embryos. Embryos, the very earliest stages of development for anything, of a fish, a salamander, that's like a lizard, a chicken, a rabbit, and a human. How similar do these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? Why do we, right here, humans, look almost exactly like a chicken? Could be evolution. So let's check out these guys too. Got some terrible looking things on here. Yuck. Bats, rats, and eagles. I mean, God bless America with the eagle, but the other two, disgusting. So, could you see a similarity? Can you see that the bat is almost like a cross between these two? You can see the wings here. You can see this disgusting rat head. Looks very similar, doesn't it? Probably have a common ancestor. Now, these things are called homologous. Homo means same. So these are structures that are very similar. So you can see this. This is going to be on your test alert, that a human, cat, whale, and bat all have very similar arm bones. So humans have, we have these 5 bones. Look, so does a cat. Look, so does a whale. Look, so does a bat. Why do we all have these exact, they're different proportions, but look at that. They're so similar. This one's trippy too. We both have the double arm bone. Double arm bone. See this? Different species having similar components are homologous structures. Here you can see we've got Shamu versus Nemo. Shamu is a mammal, gives birth to live young, but Nemo doesn't. What are the similarities? Then there's a bat's wing, a butterfly wing, and a bird's wing. What are the similarities between those? They have similar structures and they have similar functions. All right, 10. Now, does environmental selection act on this or this? And when I say this, remember that this is how it looks, phenotype. Does it act on phenotype or does it act on genotype? What do you guys think? Natural selection, remember, survival of the fittest. Is it actually going to change a DNA of an organism? Or is it going to just favor the phenotype that works? Now, a gene pool is all the genetic information for a population. So the gene pool of, for example, it would be like in the forest, in a certain forest, all of the squirrels that live in that forest, because they're all going to just reproduce with each other. They can't go on Match.com and find a squirrel across the country who meets their emotional needs. No, they're just going to mate with whichever squirrel is close by. So that is the gene pool. The more variety in the gene pool, the better the population will survive. Then we've got allele frequency. Maybe you remember that word allele. Remember it was like the big B, that thing? Those are alleles, the letters. So allele frequency is the measure of how common an allele is in a population. So if it's very, very common for example, in Sweden, it's a country far away, a lot of people have blonde hair and blue eyes. That is going to be a much higher frequency than, for example, Los Angeles, because, we noticed that in our classroom there was nobody with blonde hair, right? So frequency is going to be different. Now there's the 3 sources of variation. There is meiosis, sexual reproduction, which we know, right? Meiosis is in the crossing over. It's what allows for genetic diversity. We've got mutations. Mutations, remember, they just happen sometimes. They happen naturally. They happen as a result of, they just happen naturally, usually. Sometimes as an outside force, but usually it's just a random thing. And then hybridization. Hybridization is when two organisms will grow together, and usually we're talking about plants. So we're going to look at the different types of distribution. So this is where we're going to make some graphs. And we're going to show different ways that a phenotype looks in a population. So a normal distribution is going to look like something called a bell curve. A bell curve is when there's a small amount here, most of the people will be somewhere in the middle, and then a small amount here. Do you notice that it kind of does look like a bell, right? If I made it like this, it's a bell. So this is called a bell curve. This is a normal distribution, normal curve. So, stabilizing selection, intermediate phenotypes are favored. So when it says intermediate phenotypes are favored, extreme phenotypes become less common or even disappear. So in this case, it would be like this. See the difference there? There wasn't as much of from the normal distribution, there wasn't as much of a drop off. Remember, normal distribution was kind of like this. See how there would be some people here, some people here? So intermediate phenotype just favors the right in the middle. Directional selection, this favors one extreme. So, for example, let's say I'm going to graph the Lakers basketball team on here. How small is like the smallest guy? I don't know, maybe he's like 5'10" or something. So there wouldn't be anybody over here in small. They'll all be large, right, if I'm graphing their height. So it'd kind of look like something like this. See how it's favoring one extreme. Now, favoring opposite extremes is disruptive selection. So let's pretend like those Lakers are going to play a basketball game with some third graders. If I was going to graph the sizes of the third graders versus the basketball players, my graph would look like this. There would be nothing here in the middle, right? The third graders are going to only be so tall. The basketball players are only going to be so tall. So it's going to be disruptive selection. There's going to really be nothing. Here you see some more examples here of the graph used for rats. So let's talk about gene flow. So gene flow is the movement of alleles from one population to another. So you can see I've got a picture of some birds flying south for the winter. These birds are going to move their genetic information from their population in the north down to a new population in the south. So this happens when plant seeds spread to new areas. You know, if it's real windy, maybe the plant seeds will spread. Maybe somebody will take a plant home with them from the mountains and will plant it at home. That's another way. So gene flow increases genetic diversity. So it's actually a good thing because we don't want too much of the same thing all the time. There would be no diversity that way, and it's just really not a good thing. If there's not enough gene flow, a new species could actually form in that way, because it would start to just look so different than everything else. We need diversity in order to survive and in order to get some of those good dominant genes. Genetic drift. So this is going to be due to chance rather than selection, meaning that it's just random. You know, the genes, you don't get to pick which genes you get and all that. You just don't. So in a smaller population, then frequency is going to change, meaning some things are just going to start to become more common, like blonde hair, for example, than brown hair, and then it's just going to start to be dominant. So we've got this thing called the bottleneck effect. So this occurs after an event greatly reduces population size. So a great example of this could be something like a forest fire. So let's pretend like this bottle is all the different foxes in a forest. Let's say that these ones that can fall out of the bottle are the ones that made it out in time. So when they return and start to reproduce, see how there's no yellow? There's only one green. See, only one green, mostly purple. The new population is going to look a little bit different. It's going to be less diverse because there's not as many individuals in the population. So if that happens, it could even be called the founder effect. So when a few individuals from a population start a new population. So here we have a great example of where a few of the red ladybugs moved over to a new island. All of their ladybugs babies are going to be red. They're not going to be yellow anymore because they don't have any yellow ladybugs to mate with. So I always like this one. Who has to invest more in producing offspring? Males or females? So I usually like to ask this in class because we get some interesting answers. So if you think about it, males are going to produce their gametes constantly. That's sperm, right? They're going to get a new load of it quite often. They have very few costs to raising their offspring. Whereas you think about females, so this is not just in humans, I mean, we're talking about animals, right? So females, mammals have a finite number of eggs. We do not have an unlimited supply. And also, females, if they're mammals, have to carry the baby. That is a very big physical cost. They would also have to nourish that baby. So there is a lot, and they're limited to cycles and how often they can have a baby. So that is very, very higher cost of reproduction for a female than. So in that case, females are generally very choosy. And sexual selection is where certain traits increase mating success. So you can see here we've got these boy, what are they called? Deer or moose or something. And they're fighting for the lady. And whichever one is stronger and has better antlers is going to win that fight. Same goes for him. He's got tusks as well that are going to help him if he needs to fight for a lady. So we've got some things now. We've got speciation. When you see that speciation, you should think of like specialization. So that's when two or more species arise from one species. So it's where two species, where it was once one species, like one type of penguin, and then over time, because of some different things, they became two types of penguins. Or for example, bears. It was black bears, and now we have black bears and polar bears, but they were probably from a similar ancestor. Now, reproductive isolation happens when two populations cannot mate successfully anymore. So like with like a polar bear and a black bear, they cannot mate successfully. They are officially different species now. So there's three types. There's behavioral, geographic, and temporal. So right now. So behavioral. So in class, I usually do this whole dance thing about this. So this is in differences in courtship or mating behaviors. So let's look at these guys on the left. So this bird right here is trying to impress his lady by doing this really awesome dance. So he's like dancing, he's getting down, he is showing his moves. And this lady, she's going to be like, all right, I'll do that. Or she's going to be like, no thanks. So depending on his courting dance, she's going to say, all right, let's do this. Let's have babies. Because that's how it works in the animal field. They don't ask like, oh, hey, do you have a college degree? Like, what was your major? They don't do anything like that. They're animals. So these guys on the left do the courting dance. Here, these guys on the right, he is doing this really amazing thing called the pointing display. So he's basically lifting up his beak in the air, he's pointing it, and then he'll point it the other direction, and then he'll point it again. And then she's going to be like, oh, yeah, you know how to point. All right, that's good. I'll take it, right? So what happens if she sees him doing this? She's going to think she needs to call an ambulance. She's going to think there's problems. She's not going to think, oh, yeah, hey. Because they are behaviorally isolated. In the same way, she is going to see him dancing, and she's going to think he has problems. She's not going to think, oh, yes, he would like to mate with me. That's because behavioral isolation. Then we've got geographic isolation, and that's just what it sounds like. Remember I told you geographic? Think about map or place. So this is when a physical barrier is going to keep two groups, or is going to take one population and turn it into two. So here we have a river. If a river suddenly, I don't know, separates these two populations, look at this. Now they're going to look totally differently. They're not even going to notice each other. They're not going to be able to mate anymore. And finally, we've got temporal. So temporal, you should think about time. Temporal refers to timing. So this guy, he gets ready to mate in the spring. This guy gets ready, I should say girl. This girl is ready to mate in the fall. So if a boy came up to her in the spring, she would be like, I don't know what you're talking about. No, thank you. And same here. If a boy came up to her in the fall, she would say, it's not time right now. So that's how they become different species as far as when it comes to time. So in class, we're going to draw a Venn diagram, and it's going to show the similarities and differences. So I am going to do this in class. Now we've got two new things called convergent and divergent. Usually in class I show this with my hands. Converge means to come together. This is when two species evolved to become more similar. Convergent, coming together. Whereas divergent means two species are becoming more and more different from each other. So you could remember, D for different, divergent, different, becoming more and more different. Now here's an interesting one, it's called coevolution. Coevolution. Now this is when two species are going to change in response to each other. So for example, we have this wolf. His dinner is this deer. So if he is chasing these deer, what's going to happen? The slow ones are going to keep dying. They're not going to be able to have slow deer babies. So the fast deer are going to be able to have babies, and their babies will be a little bit faster every year. A little bit faster, a little bit faster, a little bit faster. So in response to the wolf, the deer will evolve. Same thing goes. Then that means the wolf, the slower wolf, he's going to have to get faster so that he can chase the deer. They're evolving in response. Now, extinction. Mass extinction, when we hear extinction, elimination of a species from Earth. Maybe you've heard of save the whales or the rhinos. Maybe you've heard about dinosaurs and you know that they are extinct. There's no more dinosaurs around. So mass extinctions, they're rare, but they can destroy a whole bunch of species at the same time. Now, and only 5 have occurred in the last 600 million years, and one of those is the one you're thinking of, the one where the dinosaurs died. We're skipping notes. Okay, here's your secret password question. What type of animals did Darwin study on the Galapagos Islands? Send me that question. That's how I'll know you watched it. Otherwise, you will not take your test. All right, you guys. Well, it's been nice. I will be seeing you soon. And email me if you have any questions. And remember, we'll definitely be going over a lot of stuff in class and doing quite a few activities. So don't stress. Just make sure you have everything filled in and you watch The Fabulous Mr. Parr. All right, ta-ta for now. See you later.